I'm going to do the same thing I did last time. I'm going to take your picture and then post on Instagram because we had so many people join when I did that.
Okay.
Should I? You feel gorgeous.
Okay, ready? I'm going to take, everyone smile and pretend like you're having a good time. Okay.
Pretend like you love each other.
It's easy when it's true.
We do love each other.
All right. Do you want your water over here in case you get a little thirsty?
Please. Thank you.
Yeah. Nice stickers. Okay. And then I'm gonna do my Insta post. Link up. Oh, you're live. Hi, guys.
Now it's on like repeat.
What is happening?
Echo.
I think because it takes a minute to delay.
Oh. Hey everybody, we're going to get started in just a couple minutes. We'll let a couple other people come on in. This is obviously that.
There's like a little bit of a delay from what you do to what I see. That's why.
That's so funny.
Good to
What are you doing?
Nothing. I'm just being weird.
Nothing. I just can't stop looking at myself.
I wonder why.
Oh man.
I'm going to say join these two cuties live to learn all about beneficial.
I love it.
It's Wednesday. I'm wearing pink.
It's Wednesday, my dudes. Look at you. You did it.
It's been a tough day.
Would you say we're into summer?
Almost.
Okay.
Really close.
We're getting there. Yeah.
Okay, 1 minute and counting.
We're on the final stretch. Okay, we'll give it just a little bit. And then we're going to go ahead and get started. You ready?
Yeah.
Okay, let's go. Okay, all right. Well, welcome everybody to our live stream. Thanks for tuning in. Today we're talking about pests and beneficial insects in Utah. My name is Emily Hall. Here with me, I have a very special guest, Erica. Erica is our IPM manager. IPM stands for Integrated Pest Management. So she's our Integrated Pest Management manager. So do you want to tell us a little something about yourself and your experience?
Well, I have a degree in horticulture. I've been doing this for about 10 years, almost exclusively here at Glover. And what really floats my boat is making the plants happy and pretty. And so my job primarily is finding pests, treating pests when necessary, using the appropriate methods. And my job also includes making sure that plant health guidelines are followed here within the nursery so that we have the best possible quality stock that we can sell to our customers. Things that are really happy and healthy, which also includes water. A surprising number of issues can be caused by under and over watering. So I run the crew that waters the largest square footage of the nursery with the woody plant materials, the trees and shrubs. The herbaceous department has their own watering crew, and they do a good job of that as well. But my crew is usually about 15 people a year. So yeah, I love what I do. I love making the plants happy and seeing things that I have touched in some way or another, helped make them happy with fertilizer or chemical application if necessary. I like seeing those things go out the door because I know I've done a good job and someone likes it and has chosen to buy that thing based on how it appears in the nursery. So it's a really rewarding position. I like it a lot.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, it's really, really important. And especially as we are transitioning from spring to summer, we kind of start to encounter a whole host of different things. So this is a really good time to kind of talk about this topic, right?
Yeah, the heat for sure. In entomology, when it comes to pest life cycles, a lot of the pest pressures are determined by degree days, which is a cumulative temperature, indicator of when a certain insect will become active. And right now we have accumulated enough hot days that certain types of pests are coming out that have not yet been out this year. And so we're starting to see a lot of aphids. We're starting to see a lot of grasshoppers. Grasshoppers are going to be a really big issue this year, but yeah, so definitely on our way into summer. We might not be there yet on the calendar, but we're getting there for temperatures for sure.
That is super interesting, like about the, what did you call it? Degree days?
Degree days, yeah. Now, USU and a lot of other resources around the country, they have their own tracking. USU here in Utah has it's called TRAPS. It's a system that they use that calculates the temperature and the number of hours we've been above that certain temperature, and you can go and based on a location and a particular type of pest, you can get a predictor of where it is in its life cycle. That is also how they determine the spray dates for like coddling moth. That's how they determine the spray dates for the peach borers. There are multiple kinds of peach borers, but the one that's usually the biggest issue is the greater peach tree borer. There's also one called peach twig borer, but that's not as much of an issue. But USU has excellent resources on when to spray and suggestions for which kinds of chemicals that are most effective at treating that particular insect.
Wow, that is super interesting. I don't think I knew that. That's such a good tool to be able to kind of try to pin down when things are going to be happening. So, okay, so you said, you mentioned aphids are starting to come out. Grasshoppers are kind of on the incline. What else are we kind of looking at this time of year? What starts to come out?
Powdery mildew. And we are quickly approaching the time when it's most effective to spray for borers. The greater peach tree borer is actually a clear moth, and the adults are getting ready based on degree days to emerge from trees. The larvae have been in the trees since last year. They're getting ready to emerge and fly around and find the next tree to go lay their eggs on. And that spray window for those is coming up really quickly. Usually you start spraying the beginning of June, and you spray several times through the summer, depending on which organic control or which synthetic control. But what you do is spray the trunk so that when the adults are finding a tree and laying their eggs, the larvae never end up being able to get into the tree to do additional damage. So with USU, they have these newsletters that you can sign up for, and it's a subscription, but they only send out 1 or 2 a month, but they alert you and say, okay, hey, now is the time you need to start paying attention for. And they have these newsletters for fruit and vegetable. They have it for lawn and other ornamentals. So if you have had issues with grubs or other kinds of issues in your lawn, they'll give you a heads up on when the right time to treat is.
That's awesome. I love USU. That's so nice because it can kind of help give you an idea of like what's coming up, or, you know, what to be prepared for, instead of just walking out and you see all this damage and you're like, oh, you know, kind of on the tail end trying to catch up.
Yeah, prevention is key. You know, if you have we're just going to keep using peach tree borers as an example because it's coming up and it's a really big issue. And a lot of homeowners come to our nursery saying, hey, I've got this gumming out the side of the bottom of my tree. What do I do? Well, a lot of times when you see that gumming, it's a gummosis. It's the tree's natural reaction to some kind of damage. It can be caused by a lot of different things, but more often than not, it's caused by a borer. And a lot of times there's not much you can do once the larvae are already in the tree except wait for them to exit the tree. Some of the actual controls that will take care of the larvae inside the tree will harm the fruit. So you have to be careful not to have any chemicals that will make your fruit toxic to eat, consume. So sometimes your only options are to wait for those larvae to leave the tree or to just prevent them in the first place. So what's that saying? An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
Yes,
That's exactly
I think I said it right.
I think that's it. We nailed it.
But it's absolutely true when it comes to pest control. It is so much easier to head off any kind of infestation than to solve it after the fact. For example, aphids. If you see a big cluster of aphids on a rosebud or at the tip of a fruit tree branch, a lot of times releasing ladybugs at that point, it's helpful for sure, but the infestation is already there and the ladybugs might not be able to help you get it under control. The infestation has gotten to a point where if it's visible to you and it's causing damage to the tree, it might be at a point where you need to take other measures, which is where this thing called thresholds comes into play. So Emily and I are going to talk about thresholds at some point. Should we talk about that now?
I think we'll save it.
Okay.
We'll save it. Okay. So I have a question for you. So as we're, you know, as the weather moves on and we get hotter, and if you're going out in your garden and maybe you see some new damage or, you know, something that you're not familiar with, what would you like? How can people try to identify what it is? What's your like best suggestion for that? Because I feel like that's kind of one of the hardest parts is, you know, you got to figure out what's happening first, right?
True. Resources online that have examples of damage based on the kind of crop it is. So like Pacific Northwest handbooks, I know Emily knows all about these. And while we here in Utah are not in the Pacific Northwest, they have a wealth of information of different kinds of ornamental crops, you know, different trees and shrubs and things, but also vegetables, and they have different kinds. So you can look up by what the plant is, and you can sort of go through the different things that will possibly be affecting that plant. And they have photos of this kind of damage or this kind of damage, etc. The flip side of that is you can look by disease and say you're looking for verticillium wilt. You can go and find an entry in the Pacific Northwest handbooks for verticillium wilt and find all of the different kinds of plants or trees that that particular fungus can affect. So you can go from this side or you can go from this side, but the information is there. USU has a ton of resources. We here at the nursery, our diagnostics desk is fantastic at helping to determine what the cause of certain types of damage could be. And then also just the omniscient Google. Sometimes you can be as vague as spots on a raspberry leaf and go through images until you find one that looks like the kind of damage that you have. And then you'll see that it's leafhopper damage or something. And that can lead you to finding more resources about what might be causing that. So just, I mean, Google doesn't know everything, but Google is a good first step if you have no idea. And then you could come to the nursery, bring us a leaf, bring us some photos or something, and we can help you go from there.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, so you mentioned ladybugs as what did you call them in that form? Like when you were releasing them?
Ladybugs are one of many beneficial insects, and they can be used as part of an IPM program. But they are something that is pretty familiar to most homeowners. They are a species that are very popular. There's a lot of novelty, but really also effective control that comes with ladybugs. Homeowners often will also know about lacewings. Green lacewings are also very effective. Surprisingly, it's not the adults that are effective, it's their larvae. So sometimes you'll buy adults, but then they'll lay eggs, and the larvae will be the ones that go and eat the aphids. But with ladybugs, it's both the adults and the larvae that will eat the aphids. And praying mantis, mantids in general, they will also do a pretty good cleanup job. But beneficial insects are frequently used in IPM programs in the horticulture industry, in greenhouses, out in the fields, etc. I use a lot of them here in the nursery myself.
Yeah. So what exactly, like, how would you define what a beneficial insect is? I mean, it's kind of in the name. It's a good thing, but why do we want them?
They help us keep things in check. That does not mean zero harmful pests. It means a healthy level of harmful pests. I'm not sure if that makes sense, but a couple of aphids is completely normal. It's to be expected in any perfectly balanced ecosystem. If you have a backyard that has 0 insects in it, it is not a healthy ecosystem. Everything is just like, wolves being a predator out in the wild, etc. There are natural checks and balances within our ecosystems, including insects. And by having the aphids available, I suppose you could say, you encourage these populations of beneficial insects that can help you keep the aphids under control. Sometimes by eliminating the aphids altogether, you are also eliminating all of the beneficials, either by deterring them from your yard or actually killing them in the process of taking out the aphids. And so there's always a natural level that is acceptable, and beneficials kind of are any insect that gives you some kind of benefit when you're growing something for some reason, whether or not that reason is for aesthetic enjoyment, like you have a really pretty flower and you enjoy it. The beneficials can help keep the leafhoppers off of that and keep them from destroying it. Beneficials can help you keep your tomatoes happy. There's a little teeny tiny beneficial that's called a minute pirate bug, and they can go after a lot of the harmful insects on tomato plants. So sometimes you'll see this little tiny thing that's smaller than 1/8 of an inch, and it has this like cross mark on its back, and it's really cute, but they are beneficials. So beneficials need to have support also with plants that produce pollen that they will also eat. So you need to have plants for pollinators in order to encourage additional beneficials. Like, for example, there's a spider mite. It's a predatory mite, so it goes after the bad spider mites, but it also eats pollen from flowers that are blooming. And it's one of the beneficials that I use here in the nursery. So if you have only a couple of the bad mites and it's not enough to sustain the population for the predatory mite can also find additional food with the pollen. So that's just an example of another way that you can support their populations.
That's super cool. So there's like a lot of different beneficial insects, right? Like I feel like there are some that are more common, like the ladybugs, lacewings, parasitic wasps.
Yep.
But there's like a lot out there, right?
Yeah, so many. Some of the other ones that I use in the nursery are midges. They're Aphidoletes. They're a type of midge that goes after aphids, and then I use the Aphidius parasitic wasps here in the nursery, and then again those predatory mites. But there are so many other types of options for beneficials. It's really amazing how many options you have.
That's so cool, because like you mentioned with the pirate one. That's how I'm gonna remember it from now on.
My new pirate bug.
The little pirate bug. So because there's some that can be really specific for like specific crops. So that's so interesting. But then of course there are the more broad spectrum ones that are what's the word I'm looking for? That'll go after.
I don't know. Broad.
Okay,
broad,
we'll just go with that.
Yeah, versus specific. Broad versus specific.
Yeah.
But with the beneficials, there are native populations as well, and you can help encourage. You don't have to release them yourself. You can just encourage those that are in your area. There's one called an assassin bug. Ooh. And when a few years ago, when I started implementing the True IPM program here at the nursery, I started seeing assassin bugs here in the nursery for the first time since I've worked here. And assassin bugs are fantastic. Then there's another one called hoverfly or syrphid fly. They started showing up in the nursery when I quit spraying. Their larvae are fantastic at taking care of aphids, and so chemicals are not always, they should not always be your first choice. And these beneficials will start showing up when you are not deterring or killing them.
I love that. Okay, so you did mention there is a difference between like supporting natural populations versus doing like just releases. So I want to talk more about how we can support more of our natural population. So of course you mentioned growing like a diversity of flowers, which kind of is, I feel like it's pretty similar to thinking with like pollinators, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Sure. Okay. So we're looking for like a diversity in the flowers themselves, but also having like staggered bloom times.
Staggered bloom times, also at least considering flowers that are native to this area. Native plantings are far more nutritious for beneficials than are a lot of the highly bred ornamental kinds of plants that you would buy in a nursery. Not that they can't support beneficials, but they might not be as nutritious. It's the difference between a hummingbird finding nectar in a nice flower, a trumpet vine at your house, versus sugar water out of a feeder. They might both feed the hummingbird, but one is a better natural food source compared to the other. So I definitely recommend at least considering natives. There are a lot of really beautiful natives that can work well in traditional landscapes. And we have a lot of those available here in the nursery. And we can also make a lot of recommendations for plants that support these pollinator gardens, not just for butterflies, not just for bees, but also for the native beneficials.
Yeah, okay. And I would imagine you'd probably also want to have some things that are for the foliage, like not just the bloom.
Yes, actually, yeah, that's a really good point. So there are some native bees, for example, that are called leaf cutter bees. And leaf cutter bees will use parts of leaves for their nest building. And on redbud trees, sometime in the spring, you'll see these really nice, perfectly round cuts out of the sides of the margins of the leaves.
I think they're so cute.
And it looks otherworldly. It looks abnormal when
perfect.
It's like somebody took a hole punch.
Yes.
And punched right on the edge of a red bud leaf. And for some reason, they really love red buds. You'll see it on almost every red bud in the valley. You'll see these perfectly notched corners or circles, semicircles out of the sides of the leaves. But the leaf cutter bees take that piece and take it back to help build their nests so that they can support their population, their offspring for the next season. So that is purely aesthetic. It doesn't harm the tree at all, and it is supporting a native population. So don't spray your red bud when you start seeing these, because you should be supporting the leaf cutter bees.
Yeah, that is so interesting. And then one more thing that I want to talk about with just supporting is also you've already talked about it a lot, is like the life cycles of beneficials and pests, and how understanding the life cycle is super important, and something with especially the native beneficial populations is providing like habitat for them over winter, correct?
Yeah. There's a really big recommendation within the pollinator-friendly, the beneficial-friendly community to leave your perennials and grasses and some of your other, when it's possible, leaf clutter or some other kind of debris over the winter, because those places can provide again, habitat, but some shelter for the winter, some place for them to go dormant. And if you clean all of that away, your native bees and a lot of these other insects won't have any place to overwinter in your yard, and they will go find another spot. And if you're trying to support them, you should leave some of that for them.
Yeah. And don't most perennials kind of prefer a spring cutback?
Yeah, it really is that case, because if you cut down a perennial and sort of expose their crown for the winter, they're far more susceptible to things like rot over the winter, because too much snow gets right on the top of their crown. Where if they have all of this foliage that's sort of, or old stems or something that are supporting the snow, it's not getting right down into it and freezing it out or rotting it out. And then the birds will use a lot of that material for nesting as well. Sometimes winter seeds, the seed heads on a lot of these plants will provide some forage for the birds over the winter. But the plants themselves, a lot of them really prefer to be cut back in the spring.
Yeah. What's the ideal time to cut them back, like in spring? Because there's also that window of they still haven't emerged yet. So when can you tell that it's ready to cut?
I usually wait until I see new growth.
Yeah.
If you have a grass, for example, an ornamental grass, and you have all of these old blades on it, then you just right down here at the bottom of the crown, you start to see the little green blades coming up for the new season. Make sure that you take your old blades down to a reasonable height. Usually 6 or 8 inches is kind of typical for a lot of them. A lot of the grasses we can tell you what yours would be. Like a pampas grass might not be 6 inches. That might be too low for a pampas. But when you start to see the new blades is when you would take the old blades down, or when you have black-eyed Susan or Rudbeckia, when you start to see the new tiny little green leaves coming out of the crown, that's when you would take down the stems and the leaves from last season.
Yeah, I like that. That's such a good like guideline to follow, because I mean every year is different weather-wise, so you can't just say March 15th, that's the day.
Well, exactly. And you know, getting back to the degree days that we talked about for the insects, it's really similar for temperatures and waking up plants. The forsythia, for example, start to bloom when the soil gets to a certain temperature, and the roses their buds start to swell when the daytimes and night times have been a certain temperature. And so based on those as indicators, like you're watching those plants for when they are telling you is the right to prune them.
Yeah, I love that. You know what? This is a fun little fact that I like about forsythia, because a really big problem that's happening in the United States is the emerald ash borer.
Mm-hmm.
We don't, it's not in Utah yet, but it's been devastating for ash trees, and it's really hard to treat for it because it's a really small treatment window, and it's really hard to know when they're at that stage because they're all in the tree.
Yeah.
So it's really hard to know that. But one thing you can use is the forsythia blooming. That can tell you when it's okay to, you can start those treatments. It's in that right stage. So I think it's so cool to use other points in nature to kind of help orientate us, because that can be true across different climates. It's like you can look for the forsythia, or you can look for this blooming. It's something that's more tried and true to go by.
Yeah,
I think it's so cool.
Like you said about March 15th, it's not always going to be the same. Sometimes it can be weeks and weeks different from this year to this year. Was it just last April that we had a really long winter and everything was delayed? There were trees that were not even leafed out until June because we were basically in winter until the end of April.
That's crazy.
And, that's a lot later than a typical season, but you don't want to prune while a tree is still, I don't know. The point is you're watching for certain signals to know when the right time to do something is.
Yeah. Have you ever built an insect hotel?
Not from scratch. I got suckered into buying one time, but my whole yard is an insect hotel. But I know what you're talking about. They're usually like tubes or like pine cones or other things that are in a little structure that give great. Now I can't remember the name of the bee. I'm forgetting the one name.
Mason bee.
Thank you. Mason
You're
bees.
welcome.
Mason bees really like to it's only my job. I just can't remember the name of a really important bee. So they really like to find homes in long tubes of material. And so a lot of these insect hotels is what they call them. They provide a lot of these. They almost look like cinnamon bark rolls.
Yes.
They're almost like straws, but they're a natural material like bamboo or something. But they provide the perfect sort of nesting location for these insects, and they encourage overwintering and protected sites.
Yeah. I've done specific like mason bee houses before. I think it's so fun. They're
really great.
Yeah, they're really fun. Okay. So we've mentioned IPM several times to this point. So let's define it. Let's talk about it. What is IPM? What does that mean?
IPM is this overarching concept that basically chemicals should be your last option. It's not that chemicals don't have any place in pest control, whether it's an actual insect or arachnid or some other kind of pest, but that also includes fungal, bacterial, other sorts of things that could be causing some sort of detriment to a crop of some type. So chemicals definitely do have a place, and sometimes they are the most effective. They are the easiest, but they should be considered as a last resort. And so integrated pest management is this concept that you should try this, you should try this, and this, and this. And if none of these things work, then you would consult and work on finding a chemical that can address the issue for you. So the first pillar of IPM is prevention. Anything that you can do to prevent the pest either from getting into your environment. So like sometimes here at our nursery, they come on trucks. They come with the plants, and it's my job to catch them as they're coming off the trucks and quarantine or do what other kinds of things they need to do to make sure that those insects don't make it into the other plants that we already have here at the nursery, so that I can take care of them. Also, the second pillar is like, it's monitoring. So you would have sticky cards, you would have scouting, you'd have people who are helping you keep your eyes on different things and looking for certain kinds of damage or symptoms, signs of a problem.
Right.
If you aren't looking for those, you might miss things until they become a problem.
Right.
And then there are biological controls, which are these beneficials. There are also mechanical controls. These are all pillars of IPM. Mechanical controls would be like if you had a greenhouse and the vents were open and outside bugs were getting into the greenhouse. Mechanical is simply closing the vents so that the outside bugs don't come in anymore. Some of them are cultural controls, like changing your watering cycle. You know, a lot of issues with turf is because people water incorrectly. Also nutrition. So like poor fertilization practices can encourage or discourage pests from attacking certain kinds of crops. Like that peach tree borer we've talked about a couple of times, greater peach tree borer, they seek out trees that are already sick. They know that their larvae are going to have an easier time getting into a tree that's already weakened. So if you're doing a good job at keeping proper fertilization, kind of factors into the whole prevention part of it in all. And then mechanical can also include like hand picking is something that it's called, where like in other parts of the country, Japanese beetles are a really big issue, and they will recommend that homeowners go out to their roses or whatever plant the Japanese beetles are on and actually just pull the beetles off a plant and put them in a bucket of soapy water. And usually there are something like 10 or 15 beetles on a particular rose plant. And then you go to the next one, you clean off a few beetles, and you go to the next one and clean off a few beetles. And just simply by reducing the population altogether, just one go at it can make a huge difference in how much damage is being done. You can do the same thing with aphids, where if you have the tip of a plant that's really infested with aphids, just make one snip and you've reduced the population by 1,000 aphids. So
Yeah.
That's one way that you can do a mechanical control, is by taking out a tip of a plant.
How big are these beetles?
Japanese beetles are probably
Oh wow.
Maybe about the size of a dime. They're really cool looking, but they are super destructive. They will just decimate crops if they get to be out of control, and they will eat holes in every plant in your yard. They are not species specific for their host plants. They'll go after a lot of different things.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Okay, can you take us through, let's take us through an example. So peach tree borer. So we've got peach trees. With like thinking of the peach tree borer in mind, what's our prevention that we do for that?
Prevention would be having a healthy tree to begin with. That would be the watering, the fertilizing, and then just making sure that you maintain around the bottom of the tree, that you don't create a place where, like a physical insect hotel at the bottom of the tree where the borers would want to lay their eggs. And that means keeping mulch away from the bark at the base of the tree. You know, it's okay to mulch around the sides of the planting area, but you should never volcano mulch. You should always have a couple of fingers clear away the mulch from the trunk. And that makes it so there's not a good hiding place for the adults to get in there and lay their eggs at the bottom of the trunk. So that all kind of factors into prevention. Okay. And then monitoring is going out there, looking for damage, looking for that gummosis that we were talking about. It's kind of sappy, sticky. It's kind of gross looking, but
it is.
It's a good indicator that there's something wrong. Also with monitoring, that would be like sticky traps or pheromone traps or some other kind of system where if a greater peach tree borer adult has been found in a neighboring farm or some nearby locale, that you know that it's time to be protecting your tree right now. So that factors into monitoring.
Okay, cool. And I feel like some of the cultural kind of ties in with prevention.
Sure.
Like proper planting, airflow, having all of that in there, right? Okay. Okay. Is there any mechanical or physical that you could do if you started to notice some signs?
It's a little bit difficult with the greater peach tree borer. There's not a lot you can do. You can't stand out there and like just swat the adults away.
Yeah.
So mechanical might be a little bit of, I don't want to say misleading in this particular case, but it would be doing something to protect the trunk. Like there are trunk wraps and other kinds of things that you could theoretically put onto a trunk for a greater peach tree borer, but they might not be the best control option.
Right. Okay. Okay. So we go through our mechanical processes. We're still having issues. Are there any biological options?
Not that I'm aware of for greater peach tree borer, but I also, like personally, I don't treat for that here in the nursery. It's not something that we see here. And so I haven't done a lot of personal, research on biological controls for that one.
Okay. Okay. So we've gone through our pyramid, and now we've tried prevention, cultural, mechanical, biological. So now we're still having issues. So now is when we would look at a chemical option.
Yeah. And the chemical options, again, there are organic controls, there are synthetic controls. Chemical is not the same thing as synthetic, because even organic controls are chemicals. They're just organic versus synthetic. So just clarifying that. But depending on which control option you choose, whichever works best for you, whatever you prefer, that'll kind of dictate how often and how it needs to be applied. But typically all you do is spray the trunk where the adults are likely to lay their eggs. You don't have to spray the whole tree. So control can be quite easy. And usually you don't need any more than one, spray bottle worth, and you just go out and spray the tree. And then a couple weeks later, you go spray the tree, and it basically protects your tree for the whole season, and then you're good for the next year.
Okay.
So that would be the chemical control. I mean, we could go through this scenario for grasshoppers, and I would have a bit different answer for a lot of these.
Right. Yeah, I feel like IPM, it's almost like a way to like think through the problem, right? And that's going to be different for every pest, and even maybe different plants that the pests are on, right? Like, yeah. So it's kind of like a way to go through of how to tackle the problem. So yeah, it's not necessarily like this is what you do every time you have a pest. It's more of this is the process to go through to kind of find the best way to treat this. Because back to like beneficials and encouraging them, it's the same thing with pollinators where we don't want to just start spraying. Right?
Yeah. IPM is essentially, is there anything I can do short of spraying? Is there something I can change that will make it so I don't have to use the chemical? And a lot of those things are really easy changes. Like in Utah, 80% of the problems that we have with turf are fungal, but they can all be fixed with proper watering and proper fertilization. For different reasons that we could go into, but you can prevent a lot of the issues that you could ever have with turf just by changing something else ahead of time. And then you shouldn't have to use a fungicide. You shouldn't have to use an insecticide because you have a healthy lawn. And so, there is almost always something that you can do short of using a chemical.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's the same thing with pollinators that we've mentioned before of, if you have a pest and you just start spraying, you may get the bad one, but then you're most likely going to get the other good ones. And just like you mentioned before, having nothing in your garden is not an ecosystem.
Yeah, definitely not an ecosystem, but also excessive chemical control, chemical use can cause resistance too. So you don't want to be spraying any more often than you need to be spraying, because then you're going to create issues where you can't even get rid of the bug anymore. So resistance is a real thing. It's a real concern, and nobody should be spraying if they don't need to spray.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. And then I feel like you mentioned, if it does come to using a chemical, always read your labels.
Always read your labels. The labels are the law.
Yeah.
Just because a little bit works does not mean more works better. Don't use more than the label lets you use.
Yeah. And I mean, there's so much information in those labels of like reapplication times and how to use for it, like different pests. Like if they list a lot in there, even though they're really tiny and sometimes hard to get off the bottle to read, but you can find them online.
You use your camera and zoom in.
Oh, yeah. Or use your camera and zoom in. Duh, that's so smart.
Or old school magnifying glasses or whatever. But yeah, the labels have a lot of information in them. You can learn a lot about the plants and the pests from those labels too. But you do want to be mindful that you are also using enough of the chemical to have decent kill rates, because that's what creates the resistance. Is if you only use a little bit over and over and over, then certain insects or whatever become resistant to that chemical. So you want to use the right amount for that pest to make sure that you get good control.
Yeah, I like that. Okay, we have mentioned this of using beneficials in our nursery. So you have implemented a beneficial program, right? And this is the second year
Yeah, the second complete season.
Okay.
It's the third year I've been working on it, but we made a lot of changes between the preliminary planning, the first season, the second season. It's always a work in progress. Sometimes one year something will work and the next year it doesn't. So, but yeah, it's my second full season of having an IPM, a true IPM program here at the nursery using beneficials. And I have been able to drastically reduce the number of chemicals that I use here in the nursery. And as I mentioned, I've seen a lot of the native beneficials coming back into the nursery where they weren't here before.
That is so cool. That's so cool. So what, how do you kind of like figure out a beneficial release program? Like where you're like, you're going to purchase them and release them. Like, how do you even start that? I feel like that's a really big question.
You go, I don't want to spray chemicals anymore. And you say, what can I do that's not spraying chemicals like a true IPM manager should do? But basically, you identify your pest pressures, you know what you're fighting and when, you know when they start showing up, where they start showing up, which crops they start showing up on. And you start making lists of what I lovingly call repeat offenders. And I do have a 3 strikes you're out list. So if I consistently have problems with a particular crop or a particular pest, then something needs to change. Obviously, what I've been doing is not working, and I need to make some serious adjustments before I create resistance in anything. But so aphids, for example, I know very well which crops are going to have aphids no matter what I do ahead of time. So I know where in the nursery I need to release these beneficials so that they are near where the aphids are and they have these yummy lunch buffets available to them when they are released. And then I know which crops I need to scout more effectively each season. Say this crop always gets aphids and they usually start showing up the 3rd week of April. So then I know, hey, it's the 2nd week of April. I better keep my eyes on that crop. So make yourself a calendar. Even if it's a really generic calendar, and then you just say, oh, I found aphids on this rose in my garden. I found squash bugs on pumpkin in my garden. I found whatever. And so you can start to identify which part of the season and where in your yard the pests are. Like if they are all around your vegetable bed, maybe you don't need to treat anything in your yard except your vegetable bed. So knowing location, what the pests are, when you see them can help you start designing an IPM program for a homeowner. IPM can be very complicated, but it can also be very simple. So, the level of detail that is included in your own IPM program is completely up to you.
Yeah, that's so cool. We have a question in the chat. Is there a beneficial insect that helps control squash bugs that you know of?
No, not that I'm aware of, but that's also one that I don't see here in the nursery. I haven't shopped for a beneficial for squash bugs.
Okay. Oh, that's interesting.
But I know that there are a lot of larvae that are sort of omnivorous, like they will go after a lot of different kinds of species. So like lacewing larvae are fantastic at eating eggs of every type. And I imagine lacewing larvae, if they were released near a squash of some kind, zucchini, pumpkin, whatever, that they would likely go after the eggs of the squash bugs. And theoretically, they could help reduce that population. Although I'd have to do a little bit more research on squash
for sure.
bugs.
But yeah, that's interesting. Do you have like a favorite beneficial insect that you used, or one that's like performed super well here at the nursery?
I love Aphidius. Aphidius is a parasitic wasp, and the life cycle reminds me a little bit of the Alien movies.
Yes.
So the wasp, which doesn't even look like a wasp, it looks like an ant with wings. It's teeny tiny. It doesn't have yellow and black markings like everybody thinks about when they think about wasps. I highly recommend looking up Aphidius wasps just so you see what they look like. There are native populations of Aphidius,
Cool.
but basically what they do is they search for and they find aphids on any given number of types of plants, and they use an ovipositor and they put an egg inside the aphid. And the aphid becomes a mummy while the larvae is all squirming around inside, and then the aphid gets big and fat and dead, and then the larvae eats a big hole in the aphid's bum and comes out as an adult and goes to find another aphid to lay more eggs. And they lay some ridiculous number of eggs inside aphids every single day. So like one Aphidius wasp could, take out 80 or 100 aphids.
Whoa.
And then those 100 will each take out 100. So within 2 generations, you've killed 1,000 aphids.
That's crazy.
And it's amazing. I love it. I love going through the nursery and seeing mummies on plants where I didn't even release the Aphidius nearby,
Right.
but they're here, they're flying around, they're finding the aphids for me, and they're taking out the aphids. It's the most amazing thing to see the mummies on plants.
That's so cool. Because there's only so many people with so many eyes. Like it's hard to find every single instance of aphid problems, I'm imagining.
Yeah.
Right?
For sure.
Do you have to do anything to like when you release them, do you have to do anything to like try to keep them in nursery?
Yeah, I mean, every beneficial insect will have different sort of recommendations for effective releases. Like even with ladybugs, if you were to buy some ladybugs from us, they recommend putting out a little dish of water, releasing them in the evening at dusk, so they're likely to get a drink and then go find a place to sleep for the night. And then when they wake up and there's a rose bush covered in aphids for them to start eating breakfast, they're more likely to stay in place. Where if you release them on a windy day, on a hot day or whatever, they might just open their wings and fly and not stay where you release them. So if you are ever going to release beneficials, make sure you read up on the most effective time to release them, which is often at dusk. And it's not on windy days.
Okay. How do you spell Aphidius?
A-P-H
Hold on.
A-P-H-I-D-I-U-S.
U-S.
There are a couple of different species of Aphidius. Like there's Aphidius urbi, Aphidius colemanii, which are like each one of them can go after a different type of aphid or a different size of aphid. I don't know if everybody knows, but there are bajillions of species of aphids, and a lot of the aphids are specific for which crops they will go after.
Wow.
So there are some aphids that will only go after monocots, and there are aphids that will only go after beech trees, like the woolly beech aphid, or there are really specific species, and sometimes this Aphidius will help you address this pest population, where this Aphidius would help you address that pest population. Sometimes there's a little bit of overlap between the two, but make sure you know what the pest is, positive identification, and know what your crop is, because that can make a difference on which species of beneficial you should get.
Okay, I love that. Okay, we have a couple questions.
Sure.
So in spirit, what would be good for aphids? Do the wasps bite people? And then they also said, unfortunately, we also have the Asian ladybugs too. Is there something that's like the best thing for aphids?
Aphids are not okay. I know we've talked ad nauseum about aphids, but aphids are really, they don't destroy, they don't decimate like a lot of other pests do. They're not like grasshoppers that will eat everything you own.
Do you have a question about grasshoppers?
I'm sure we do. But aphids, more or less, are aesthetic. Yeah, if in huge infestations, they really can affect a plant or a tree long term, but it's purely aesthetic for the season. It's very unlikely that you're going to have more than one season of damage from any given population of aphids. They might overwinter on the tree and then cause some damage next year. It might even go on and on from year to year, but you're probably never going to lose that tree to aphids. You're probably never going to lose your rose bush to aphids. Your flowers might not be perfect and ideal, but aphids are really low on, in comparison, they're really low on the scale of destruction. And frankly, I think people need to relax a little bit about aphids. Yeah, we do definitely want to address them. But if you see 3 aphids on your rose, you don't need to freak out. Like, honestly, I don't treat anything in my yard. I don't treat my roses that have aphids. I let the aphids do what they're going to do, and I appreciate the roses regardless. But going back to the question about wasps, no, these wasps don't sting people.
Nice.
Their ovipositor wouldn't even break the skin. They're, like I said, they're teeny tiny. I wish I had some to show you, but they're like the size of, they're maybe 1/8 of an inch long. They look like
really small. Like I don't even, yeah, that's really small.
It's deceptive to call them wasps, but really anatomically, entomologically, they are wasps.
Just for reference, we did do an Instagram post about the release, which is still on our Instagram reels.
Oh, cool.
Yeah,
Which
so I
shows
guess
them.
you could, I guess you could go back through the Instagram reels and find the Ophidius post and see pictures of what I use here in the nursery.
Okay. I want to, can you just touch on grasshoppers a little bit? I know we are getting a little close to time, so I want to just answer these questions that we have, and then
Sure.
we can talk about some other stuff.
Sure. Grasshoppers. So one of the biological controls for grasshoppers, which I absolutely love, is a bacteria, and they used to put it in Nolo bait, and the grasshoppers would eat it, and then the bacteria would get inside their bellies, kill them from the inside out. But it specifically isn't available. There are some other control options that are really similar bait, have an insecticide rather than a bacteria, but there is such a thing as a biological control for grasshoppers as chemical controls. The chemical controls, there are several different things you can do. We have a lot of those options here at the nursery, so just stop by if you're having issues with grasshoppers. But the one that we're really excited about is Eco Brand. It is a bait that the grasshoppers will seek out. It's made out of bran cereal, like the flakes of bran that have been rolled flat, a bit like oatmeal, and then that's been infused with an insecticide, so the grasshoppers will eat that and die. So that bran can be spread just with a little shaker out the front of a cup. Of course, wear your gloves, read the instructions, label is the law. But Eco Bran is a really good option, especially if you're seeing the tiny little grasshopper nymphs. They're starting to hop around. I've seen them here in the nursery. The ones I have here in the nursery are about 1/4 of an inch. So they're not quite adults yet, but they're here, they're out, and they're going to be adults soon. So do what you can do to get rid of them now before they become devastating.
And aren't the praying mantids good for grasshoppers?
Yeah, they will often go after them as well.
Good. Yes. Okay, great. My BFF, Corn Particulates, is asked, does neem oil spray hurt beneficials? Like if you're using them on aphids, using neem on aphids, does that hurt ladybugs or like the ladybug larva?
The residue of neem, if the neem is sprayed onto, or the residue on a plant gets onto the larvae, like as they're sort of wiggling their way around on a plant looking for aphids, it can harm them. But mostly what to look out for is that you're not spraying it while those insects are present. So just like with the beneficial pollinators, the honeybees, you never go spray a plant when the flowers are in bloom. You never spray the open flowers. You don't spray when there is a high chance for drift. Like if you're spraying this plant, you don't want whatever you're spraying to get carried on the wind over to that plant. Usually with the bees, you would wait and spray at dusk when the bees have gone home to bed for the night, etc. There are some things that you can do to help reduce the chance of contact between neem oil and these beneficials. Generally, I would say no, neem doesn't hurt ladybugs. It doesn't hurt their larvae. But if you accidentally sprayed a ladybug, if you accidentally sprayed their larvae, it's possible that they wouldn't make it.
Okay. But yeah, they're pretty
Like,
hardy.
it doesn't kill them, but it would be like putting them in quicksand, right? Like they would just not be.
Yeah, neem a lot of times will work more as a suffocant than anything else. As an oil, what it does is it gets into their breathing holes on their abdomen and sometimes makes it so they can't breathe very well. So that is actually how neem kills aphids, is suffocation.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. Okay. InSpirit has aphids on their Brussels sprouts. So it's a vegetable, it's something to be consumed. So we don't want to, do anything that's toxic, correct?
Sure.
But yeah, how would you tackle aphids on Brussels sprouts?
There are certain steps that I always recommend with aphids. And one is, if you have it on a non-essential, if you have the infestation on a non-essential part of the plant, cut that part off and throw it away. If it's on the stalk of Brussels sprouts and your infestation, if the infestation is on the stalk, then the second option is to use a relatively strong stream of water and try and wash the aphids off. Some of them can get back up onto the stalk, but you can reduce the population just by washing them off. And sometimes that means like holding the stalk in one hand and using the water, the nozzle in this hand, because if you just sprayed at the stalk, you might push it to the side and maybe break it or something. So give it some support, but while you're washing, make sure to be super thorough, get around each one of the heads on it. And just by spraying with water, you can greatly reduce the number of aphids that are on that plant. And then third control for aphids on Brussels sprouts would be some type of chemical control. Whether or not it's organic, whether or not it's synthetic. There are synthetic controls that are totally safe, and often they're more effective than organic controls. You have to apply them less often. You have to use less of them. So 7 is a really common example. they're not the only one. We sell a lot of different ones that are safe on vegetables, but it's a brand name that a lot of people know.
Yeah.
But you have a pre-harvest interval. You have a certain number of days that you have to wait from applying 7 before the Brussels sprouts are safe to eat. But that is totally an option, and it will help take care of an aphid population.
Yeah, that's awesome. Oh, thank you so much for that.
Can I ask
All
you a
right.
question?
Oh, one
I
more.
have a question about that because aphids themselves are not a toxic bug, right?
No.
So like if they're not destroying your plant, you can still like if they're just like a couple here and there, you can still harvest and just wash them off, right?
Yes.
And eat them.
Thank you, Regan. Aphids often don't cause damage. Just wash off your fruit or veggies. But I mean, it's kind of gross to harvest and have aphid guts on your fingers. But
You don't like aphid guts on your fingers?
I've had aphid guts on my fingers so often it's not even funny. But yeah, just take it to the sink and wash it.
Yeah.
Really, it's not a problem. Aphids are not going to hurt you. They're not going to hurt your kids. If you accidentally ate an aphid, which I have done.
How many aphids have you ingested?
Probably far too many in my lifetime.
And she's fine.
I had a dream last year that I was part aphid.
What?
You know that movie with it's called The Fly.
Yes.
I had a dream that I was turning into an aphid. I had wings. Anyway,
In your dream
partially
also the
aphid?
IPM manager learning how to treat yourself?
Oh my gosh.
I think that's like a video for another time. Maybe we
Oh
should
wow. Fever dream.
start to wind down. I think we're getting a little
Okay.
We're getting stir crazy in the office.
Oh my gosh. Okay, well, thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. This was so much fun. Thank you, Erica, for being here. As we're moving forward throughout the season, stop. If you have questions with identifying some issues, you've got some bugs in your yard you've never seen before, please feel free to take advantage of our diagnostics department. They are so great. I love them so much. Bring down a sample. Pictures are good, and we will do our best to help identify. And then also, if you are having some issues like developing an IPM plan, trying to figure out what your next stage is, what would be appropriate, they are more than happy to help walk you through that, help you figure that out. And yeah, if you have any questions at all, feel free to give us a call or come on down. We'll be here all season.
All year.
We'll be here all year.
All year.
Okay, well, thank you so much, guys. You guys have a good one. We'll talk to you later.